Hi, I'm Guillaume Rimbaud. Today let me show you how IPDiA's solutions can be beneficial for medical devices and cope with their strong requirements about long-term reliability and miniaturization. Following a brief introduction of our company, you will discover our core technology, the high-density silicon capacitor. Thanks to their key characteristics, our solutions comply with the highest technical requirements of medical devices, particularly the implantable ones. At the same time, they allow a much higher integration of these electronics. During this presentation, you will see some example of IPDiA's product specifically designed for medical applications. Now, who is IPDiA? IPDiA is an independent semiconductor manufacturer located in Caen, in the western part of France. Our core business is to design and manufacture integrated passive devices into silicon dies, what we name IPDs. We are operating our own 6-inch wafer fab, supported by a strong R&D team. Moreover, to go on improving our technologies, we are deeply collaborating with several well-known research institutes in Europe. Thanks to our expertise about the silicon foundry and die packaging, we will support you during your project. Managing all the manufacturing operations, our target is to always deliver you high quality products. High quality products require a highly efficient manufacturing system. To go on supporting our partnership with medtech companies, our processes and quality system have been qualified as per the ISO 13485 certification. We gave a name to our philosophy to improve design and performances of electronics, the perform miniaturization. Thanks to the integration into dies of high-density capacitors, resistors, and coils, we are offering a new way to optimize and shrink these electronics. Today, IPDiA is already proposing a wide range of solutions, from off-the-shelf silicon capacitors up to the most complex silicon interposers to cope with the diversity of medical electronics. Our main technology to allow this perform miniaturization is the high-density silicon capacitors that we will discover now. Why are these capacitors so important to improve miniaturization and performances? Thanks to silicon deep etching, we are today proposing the highest level of integration for highly reliable capacitors. The solution developed by IPDiA is to create 3D structure into the silicon to increase the effective surfaces of the electrodes. With an extremely low leakage current and an excellent linearity of characteristics facing to voltage or temperature variations, these components perfectly fit with the requirements of medical devices. We will now go deeper into these characteristics with the coming slides. Begin with a density of 25 nanofarad per square millimeter. Our recurring objective is to go on improving the capacitor density. So, we have successively developed and qualified technologies with densities of 80 and 250 nanofarad per square millimeter. With this latest solution, we are now delivering the first mass production products for medical applications, particularly for implantable ones. Because the newest applications are looking for bigger capacitance in even more constrained volumes, we are now developing a new technology with an increased density of 500 nanofarad per square millimeter. Now, we will go deeper into the technical characteristics and link them to key requirements of medical devices. IPDiA's components fit perfectly with the strong requirements of medical devices. Their characteristics are exceptionally stable facing to variations of the environmental temperature or the applied voltage. Compared to ceramic capacitors, the leakage current is minimized. Finally, they are offering the reliability of the best COG capacitors in less volume than the X7R ones, thanks to the thickness. Thanks to the high purity of the used dielectric, its characteristics are really stable facing to the temperature evolutions. Today, our highest density solution shows a variation of its capacitance lower than 100 ppm per degree C, far away of what you can observe with X7R or tantalum capacitors. Moreover, these components have been tested and qualified at higher temperatures than any ceramic capacitors, already up to 250 degrees C in that case. And we are looking on solutions compliance with a 300 degrees C use. Thanks to that, IPDiA's products will perfectly support any kind of assembly operations without creating defects, even if we are speaking about several reflows. For applications, like the medical ones, which require lower operating temperature, this allows to have a globally higher reliability and longer average lifetime of these components. The performances of our dielectric offer a great stability of the capacitor values when the applied voltage is changing. For a classical X7R capacitor, this variation is about 10% per volt and has to be taken into account during the design phase by selecting oversized capacitors. With a capacitance evolution below 0.1% per volt, the silicon solution is simplifying the design of electronics. The high quality of this dielectric is not only useful to maintain the characteristics of the capacitors, it minimizes the leakage current too. So, whatever the considered capacitor density or the operating conditions in terms of temperature or applied voltage, these currents are always below 30 nanoamp per microfarad. Compared to a ceramic or tantalum capacitors, it is at least 10 times better. For medical devices that are battery operated, particularly the implantable ones, this will increase the battery lifetime. Thanks to that, it will be able to develop devices with smaller batteries or with longer operating life. As previously indicated, the silicon capacitors are offering today the reliability of COG ones within the volume of X7R components. The number of failures with IPDiA's products is around 100 times lower than with X7R. Compared to tantalum capacitors regularly used in medical devices, our solutions are far more reliable. Moreover, our silicon capacitors are showing an extremely low aging that will not impact operations and reliability of the electronics. Last but not least, the high capacitance density is a solution to reduce the surface and volume required by the electronics. Current off-the-shelf 100 nanofarad silicon capacitors are available with a 0402 footprint. Comparatively, the equivalent high stability COG capacitors will require at least 10 times more surface to be implemented on the board. Even looking at a high reliability X7R components, you will have to cope with a 0603 footprint instead of a 0421. Moreover, IPDiA solutions are easily available in a thin format as low as 30 or 50 micrometers, which allows stacked assemblies into medical devices. Up to now, we saw that IPDiA's high-density capacitors are beneficial to save space on electronic boards. Because we are able to integrate several passives into one silicon die, it is possible to go far away in terms of miniaturization. In terms of miniaturization, IPDia is already proposing several levels of integration for the passive components and the attached circuitries. So, we are able to design and deliver either standalone components, like the low-profile capacitors and arrays, or more complex products and assemblies like IPDs or interposers that are globally shrinks of electronic boards. Now, let me show you some of their solutions. The first step to improve the integration of passives is to use our low-profile capacitors. With a thickness as low as 50 micrometers, they are available in formats compliant with wire bonding or unbending. The wire bondable version will be easily stacked to increase the capacitor density. Thanks to such a solution, it is possible to have a 10 microfarad capacitor within a 2220 footprint, at least 4 times more capacitance than with the equivalent high reliability ceramics. Moreover, you can embed such thin components directly into your flex or laminate to save space. A second way to improve the integration of the capacitors is to work with arrays. In this case, several capacitance values will be implemented in just one die. This will reduce the surface required for each capacitor, and reducing the number of components implemented on the boards will improve the reliability of the electronics. Working on a new process with higher density, it becomes possible to design even smaller components. Here is a good example of what we have done for medical application. The first step was to replace the initial ceramic array by a silicone smaller and thinner one, respecting the initial position of bumps. In a second step, we propose to implement the same capacitance values within a higher density array to go on saving surface. The final step will be to double the capacitance density and shrink one time again this component. Consequently, the final size will be only 5% of the initial array. Of course, IPDiA's technology is not limited to the integration of capacitors only. We are able to implement a more complex circuitry, mixing capacitors, resistors, and inductors in one die. With such a kind of passive network, we propose to improve the miniaturization and the reliability of the electronics thanks to a drastic reduction of on-board elements. Starting from your schematics, we determine what passives have to be put on dies and how it will be done. In this example, the targets were to reduce dimensions of a sensor and to simplify the design of the board, while respecting the initial electrical requirements. In that case, we designed two IPDs, one including most of the passives, the other one two tuning resistors that require tight and absolute tolerance. With such a solution, we were able to replace 9 passives with only 2 dies. Moreover, we implemented more values of resistors and capacitors to test different scenarios. We already spoke about die stacking and embedding, which allow a better integration of the standalone capacitors and capacitor arrays. These solutions can be proposed for the passive networks too. Moreover, we are able to put solder bumps on dies to create what we name companion chips. This one will be mounted directly onto substrates as close as possible to the active dies. If you are looking for a higher level of miniaturization, for example to cope with huge volume constraints, we can develop silicone interposers that will integrate all the passives and support the active dies. Now, Let me show you how this interposer solution works and what are its key points. With the interposer approach, all the passive elements and the circuitries will be directly created into the silicon dies. Then, we will be able to place the active elements on top of the interposer using wire bonding or die flipping. Previously so, we are able to save space using silicon passives. The interposer solution is offering one more way to shrink the electronics. Thanks to specific design rules, we can easily create smaller circuits at least 10 times smaller than the equivalent ones done with laminates. Here is an example of interposer solution realized for a telecom application. Thanks to the interposer with integrated passives, a 25mm per 25mm board was replaced by only one packaged component with the same functionalities in a drastically smaller format. In terms of interposers, we can speak about two kinds of products, the 2D and 2.5D ones. With a 2D design, a maximum of passive elements will be integrated into the interposer that will support the active dies. The connection of the interposer to the board will be realized either with wire bonding or solder bumps. In this last case, the complete interposer will be flipped onto the PCB. Concerning the 2.5D design, we will use through silicon vias to improve the vertical integration and increase the IO's density. In that case, the interposer will be similar to a BGA with a higher level of integration. The best way to understand how these technologies are supporting medical applications is to discover some practical examples. Nowadays, we are working with several medtech companies to design dedicated solutions, particularly focused on implantable devices. So, arrays, networks, and interposers have been developed for cochlear implants, neurostimulation systems, or solutions for cardiac rhythm management. These products are currently in the prototyping phase with the deliveries of the first samples, or already in the final qualification. In that last case, we are preparing the mass production by implementing the required testing. This is a good example of what could become an implantable device with our perform miniaturization. Today, the average volume of a pacemaker is around 10 cubic centimeters. Due to its size, the pacemaker has to be placed below the skin near the collarbone. Because of this, lead wires are always required to realize the connection between the device and the earth. For this kind of device, we are working on even thinner high-density dies. Thanks to their stacking capabilities and their low leakage current, several silicon capacitors will be used for this new device that could use smaller battery too. This new approach is expecting to implement a complete pacemaker into just 1 cubic centimeter, with leads that could become parts of the outer package. With a device potentially implanted directly into the earth, the implantations should be easier for the physicians and of course less invasive for the patients. Nowadays, some implantable devices automatically communicate clinical information about their owner to external systems. These communications are RF-ones and require efficient and as small as possible electronics. Sorin Group, CEA-Leti and IPDiA work together to improve the integration of such a RF module. Replacing a laminate by a silicone interposer, it was possible to reduce the dimensions of the module and its height. In this case, the RF matching networks and the decoupling capacitors are directly implemented into the interposers. Because all passives are parts of the same interposer, the relative tolerance is extremely tight, below 0.5%. So, the RF characteristics of these matching networks are well controlled without a sorting of the components. Moreover, the reduced number of used parts improve the global reliability of the module. To conclude this presentation, let me summarize the key characteristics of IPDiA's solutions applicable to the medical devices. Our technology of integrated passive devices is able to reduce significantly the dimensions of your electronics, which will be useful for any kind of implantable system. Most of the components in these systems are passive ones. Consequently, they have a huge impact on the reliability of the solution. With such a low aging, intrinsic quality, and a reduced number of components, IPDiA's networks and interposers will improve this reliability compared to standard SMDs. Moreover, these medical devices will reach higher levels of performances and have longer battery operated lifetime, thanks to the excellent stability and low leakages of IPDiA's passives. Today, the passives are not just commodities in the medical device world. They have a huge impact on the reliability and dimensions of these devices. Clearly taking care of these important constraints, the IPDiA's technologies give you opportunities to work on even smaller and reliable electronics. Thank you for your attention.